Hello everybody, this is Yasmeen from Yarkspiri fantasyart.com and welcome to another week's video tutorial. So as you can see right now, I started working some rough aspects out for this digital painting. Now the request for this week was that I draw, as you may have noticed through the thumbnail, an actual space battle. So this request did require quite a bit of research, so I did look at some Star Trek reference, Star Wars, pretty much any reference material I could get my hands on was useful in this case. I use this reference material to get an idea of what angles might work better for this overall scale and imagery. I decided to have the main focal point actually be essentially a space station, base all my perspective off that center point. By doing this, it helped draw and focus the visuals onto that one point, and you knew essentially what was going on, what the main focus in the actual painting was. All these things are very important because obviously to help lead the viewer's eye to a very specific area. Essentially, I'm using the spaceship in the foreground to act as a giant arrow towards that as well, because essentially all the perspective lines will follow and go to that point to help draw your attention there. This entire image didn't take too long to do. It took about 5 hours to complete, so it was actually a shorter image. Even though it had quite a bit of actual perspective requirements, so I was using my perspective grid much more extensively in this. Even with that, I was able to finish this actually only in a short period of time. So I'm currently in the rough stages of the design for the spaceship. I spent quite a bit of time actually working out the rough design elements for that foreground spaceship. The main reason why I had to focus on it was that essentially it was going to be acting as a giant arrow towards the space station. For this, I had to make sure that the perspective was correct, that the design actually looked like a spaceship, and that the design made sense and looked appealing. So it needed to have that really cool factor to it, because it's a giant spaceship in the foreground element. Now, since there's a battle that will be going on in this entire scene, you will see near the end of this video that I will actually add some explosions, but I only add that at the end of the video and at the end of my painting because I'm concentrating on the actual details that I have and trying to focus on getting those requirements finished before working on something else. For this image, unlike most of my previous paintings, because the background element is actually important, I am actually doing the background element first. I've already roughed out the general composition, so I already had a pretty good idea of where I was going with this painting. So since I had a pretty good idea, I was able to essentially work on the world, because essentially all this is going to be going on in front of a world, so I had to make sure that the world made sense and looked appealing before working on the spaceship designs. Now all I'm doing is I've changed the opacity of essentially my rough design, and I started sampling some of the colors and then blocking in the general shapes before moving on to some detail elements. By doing this, I'm not over focused on too much of the detail, but I'm also trying to figure out how I'm going to add that detail and what type of detail I'm going to actually include in the final painting. I am using a flat painting brush for this, so essentially this is a brush that I customized myself. It's a very low resolution brush, but it works, and I've added some effects to it to help fade out the brush strokes. But other than that, this brush is fairly simple. It doesn't have a large amount of textures to it. It doesn't need to because of the type of nature of this painting. So as I'm working out the details, I'm starting to add some brighter contrast, but I'm also darkening back some of the elements to help show a sense of scale for this spaceship. Now just start adding some of the lights. You will see me actually remove some of these lights later on and actually paint over them as I start adding more and more colors and increasing the color value and color range. I have been turning on also my saturation layer quite often to make sure that I have the right level of contrast between the focal point and the foreground element and midground elements. This is extremely important because I want to help draw the eye towards a very specific area in this painting, and the best way to do that is to do it with light. However, it's easier to do this in grayscale, which is why I'll often switch to the saturation layer that's just filled with black and just turn that layer on and off when I'm trying to see whether or not it's working. So I've just started working on the additional spaceships that I have surrounding the two main space station and spaceship, and these are essentially attacking both the space station and the ship. So I've just added some lasers to help show that, and I will be adding some of the explosions extremely shortly to help further show that there's actually a battle that's going on between these two groups. Now what's interesting is that because of the nature of an explosion, the brightest portion is actually essentially just coming out from the center. So as I was drawing that out, I actually used a fog brush for that and then started adding colors on top of it to really show that the intensity of the flame essentially. But then I went in afterwards and I used the same brush and I went in with a darker layer to help split up the form of those explosions. Now I haven't added them in yet, but they will be added shortly to this painting. So you can see that I've added actually some additional highlights to the spaceship. I have also softened out some elements that I have in the spaceship to help show that it's further back and receding as well. And I'm using the same brush also to do some of the lasers, but I'm not using it for everything because I don't want to have it too much detailed either. Adding some of the actual background ships being attacked as well. Essentially, the space station and this main ship is being overpowered, and I really wanted to show that in this painting. So thank you guys very much for watching, and I hope to see you guys soon. So thank you and take care.